Hello, BookTube. I've got a tiny bit of mail for you here. A couple of packages we can open, a box, also a book that's been opened, but that I don't think I've shown you, and also a periodical. We have the New York Review of Books. This is so new here that I haven't even read it. Don't even know what's in it. What is in here? Peter Singer has a piece in here. Does anybody review a book that I have read? Hmm? Oh, yes. Thomas Powers reviews a whole bunch of books about writers. Fantastic. Okay, so that's not really going to be a pointed piece. That's going to be much more just him writing about writing. So, what books does he talk about? Pastors of the Empty Page, which was an anthology of people remembering the writing life of Larry McMurtry, a terrific book. Books, a memoir by Larry McMurtry. In a Narrow Grave by Larry McMurtry. Literary Life by Larry McMurtry, Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, Paradise by Larry McMurtry, Rhodes by Larry McMurtry, Walter Benjamin at the Dairy Queen by Larry McMurtry, and The Last Picture Show. So a huge thing about Larry McMurtry. Okay, all right, fine. Let's see here. There's a review of Lower Than the Angels, the new book by Dermot McCullough. That's great. Jenny Oglow is in here fantastic, writing a review about that oversized book about the moon that we saw on this channel that I loved so much. Great, fantastic. All right, well, there'll be a lot of stuff in here that I won't know about, or that I won't particularly care about, but there's lots of stuff here that I will like. Great, fantastic. So that's the New York Review of Books. I still haven't quite figured out a system for periodicals, for periodical reading. I need to do that. It's been years now. I once had a perfect system. I had it for decades. Whenever I was in the country, I had a little hole-in-the-wall Chinese food restaurant. I would go there once a week with a satchel full of that week's periodicals. And I was the only white person who ever went there. I was usually the only person who ever went there, period. It wasn't really a restaurant. It was more like a couple of tables in somebody's room. It was absolutely delicious food in massive amounts. I always got the same thing, so I didn't need to order. I didn't need to see a menu. No one needed to come over and say, "Are you ready to order?" or anything like that. I walked in, said hi to everybody, sat down, and started reading and annotating. Blissfully. The world had no idea where I was. No one knew where I was. So I could just wrap myself in that and have not only the pleasure of unplugging like that, but also have the pleasure of having your periodicals completely under control, which they're not at the moment. I don't know. I'll think of something. But anyway, let's look at the first book. This book that I got, but I don't think I showed it to you. I think it's one of the many books that I open off camera, which I shouldn't do. This is by Lisa Olson, and it is The Scientist and the Serial Killer: The Search for Houston's Lost Boys. And I've not only, I got this, I opened it off camera, I read it, and I also reviewed it. But I know a lot of you don't read my reviews. Or at least some of you don't. I don't know actually how many of you read my reviews. But I thought this was wonderful. A genuinely impressive work. The second really good, really involving book about serial killers so far in the American book publishing market this year. And this is the story of Dean Corll. The other one was about John Wayne Gacy, who has name recognition. Dean Corll does not. The so-called Candyman of the Houston Heights area of Houston, and then latterly Pasadena. He doesn't have that name recognition, and I don't quite know why. I have theories as to why. I think one of the big reasons is that he didn't live. He was shot dead by one of his accomplices. So the world never heard a word from Dean Corll. Never got the spectacle of him behind bars, never got the spectacle of him in a courtroom. There was no John Wayne Gacy, no Ted Bundy, no Berkowitz or Dahmer. There was nothing like that. He's impenetrable. He's a blank slate. He's just a handful of photographs and secondhand accounts of what he said and did. And what he did was utterly horrific. He was one of the worst serial killers in American history. But somehow or other, the public awareness of American serial killers skips over him. Most casual observers of the subject, as I once blissfully was, don't know anything about this guy. They don't know that he even existed. And there are a lot of disturbing aspects about him, a lot of disturbing aspects. There are some elements of the Dean Corll, the Candyman story, that are utterly heartbreaking, just bizarrely so. Even in the story of a serial killer, just utterly heartbreaking. But two of the notable aspects of his 2 years of killing young boys and teenage boys, one was that he had accomplices. He had two accomplices that helped him do what he was doing. And they both went to jail. They'll both be in jail for the rest of their lives. One of them died of COVID in jail decades later. This all took place in the early 1970s. And the other is still alive in jail and will never get paroled. He will never be out. He wasn't just looking through a window. He was procuring these boys, knowing what was going to happen to them, and helping it to happen, helping to strangle them, helping to shoot them, standing around or sitting around huffing paint, watching them be tortured, watching them be absolutely brutalized, handcuffed to a plywood board. He's not in any way a secondary figure in here. He's every bit as guilty as Dean Corll was, and could have stopped it at any time. Either one of those boys could have stopped it at any time. We're talking dozens of victims. They could have stopped it at any time, and they didn't do it. They could have walked away. That's one way. At least they wouldn't have been involved. They also could have walked away. They could have told Dean Corll, well, I'll see you next week, and gone to the police. If they'd done that after the second victim, 25 people would have been spared. Not just spared death, but spared agony ahead of time. They didn't do it. They did the opposite of that. But the other remarkable, there are many remarkable aspects to the Candyman, but the other remarkable aspect is that he had an insatiable drug addict's hunger for killing people. It rose in him. Both of his accomplices said that they could tell when it was time to go out looking for a victim, because he would be impossible to live with. He'd be bouncing all around. He'd be tense as a violin string, because he had a physical need to kill, and it would build after a certain amount of time. And that is remarkable, because that means, I think, almost certainly, that he has a lot more victims than we think, and that we've ever found. His two accomplices knew for a fact that he would often abduct and torture and kill people without them knowing anything about it, or with them walking in at the last minute. So a large part of this book is about a forensic anthropologist who decides to try and identify some of the bones that were in the Houston evidence lockers decades later. Use new DNA technology to try to identify who these anonymous people were. This is one of the, as I wrote in my review, one of the long, really horrible shadows of a lot of serial killers is that we don't know all of the victims. And even when we know there was a victim, when we find a body underneath a body in the crawl space of John Wayne Gacy's house, we don't know who they are. And the killer usually doesn't know who they are. Gacy couldn't remember half the names of the people that he killed. Dahmer was the same way, often seemed in a drugged stupor when he was talking about it. He could provide very specific details about some things, but total blank on other things, even down to names. And some of it hangs by a shoestring. The first victim that we know of from Jeffrey Dahmer, for instance, was a kid he picked up hitchhiking and killed, probably on impulse, alone back at his house, and then smashed up into a million pieces. Dismembered and destroyed the fleshy parts of the body, smashed up the bones, and distributed them, just flung them over a random patch of his property. If Dahmer had not confessed to doing that, no one would ever have known what happened to that person. He'd just be one of a million 1970s statistics about people who went hitchhiking on the road and disappeared. It's that kind of uncertainty is heartbreaking, especially when you realize that a lot of these families died without knowing. Just died out, where the mother, the father, the siblings, they grow older, they get in car crashes, or they get diseases, and they die without ever knowing what happened, or even where their person is, where their missing person is. It's just, we were a family, we went on vacations together, you can look at our photo album, And then after a certain month of a certain year, there's one fewer person, and we have no idea what happened to that person. They're gone. Of course, it doesn't have a happy ending, even when the forensic anthropologist in this book manages to make some amazing connections. It still doesn't have a happy ending, because then, yes, the relatives know that their loved one, their boy, has been identified, but they also know what his last 2 days were like. I thought this was really, really well done. Really well done. You get basically the story of the Candyman, but this is the right lens, the right perspective. Look at it through the victims, and through the tough-natured investigation of a lot of people involved. Those investigations on a couple of points raise some questions that made me wish for a big, serious book like this, but about the case rather than about the forensics remains, rather than about John Doe's. Because a lot of the things in this, maybe they were just striking my ear because I've read up on this subject in the last year, but a lot of the things that people were saying, that people were quoted as saying in this book, raised the hackles. Is it possible that Dean Corll, the Candyman, he used to say to some of his victims that he wanted pictures of them because he was working for a pornography ring, a much larger multi-state pornography ring. And he used to threaten people as well, including his accomplices, by saying, well, I know people that can take you out, so you'd better do what I tell you. And part of the assumption involved with him for years has been that was mostly just talk. What if it wasn't? What if it wasn't? I mean, those claims are partly hurt by the fact that John Wayne Gacy said the same thing about himself, that he was just an innocent patsy, that most of the killings, of the bodies that ended up in the crawl space of his house were put there by other people, and he was such an obvious nonstop liar that I think there's a little bit of seepage going on there. A couple of the people involved here that are still alive and talking about Houston Heights say that there was a lot going on there. There were people covering up for something. I don't know. Maybe in a couple of years somebody will write a big definitive book that isn't sensationalistic about Dean Corll. That would be neat. Not in a nice way, but still. Anyway, that was the open book. It was a serial killer book. So I thought I wanted to show you that. Now we'll do the two that are in packages here and see what we have. So this first one has okay. All right. Well, this was going to be sad. This is Summers in Squid, Tickle, a Newfoundland Odyssey by Robert Finch, and this is posthumous. Acclaimed nature writer Robert Finch arrived in Burnside, Newfoundland in the summer of 1995, heartsick and directionless, with his old life on Cape Cod in tatters. The coastal village was home to just 50 year-round residents and accessible only by a 100-mile ferry crossing. Finch soon became a summer resident, buying a house, playing organ for the church, and fishing the area's waters. Offering a portrait of Newfoundland character and culture, this book explores how 3 generations of the village have grappled with the changes of the past century. Even as the fish in Squid Tickle's waters vanish, Finch sketches the enduring relationship of a village with the sea for food, work, leisure, and community life in the midst of an unforgiving but stunning landscape. And this book speaks to the desire we all have in our era to seek quiet and to reevaluate our connection to each other and the natural world. And then we have a quote from Terry Tempest Williams. This is his legacy of love. It is ongoing. My deepest bows to his sparkling intelligence, wit, and grace as a writer and friend. Yeah, he died in 2024. Okay, well, this comes out in late June. I will certainly write about this. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. I will certainly review this. So there you go. Those of you who are in Newfoundland, you might want to get this. I don't know if it'll be out in your country. And those of you who have not been acquainted with Robert Finch's writing style, you might want to pre-order this. Get your library to make sure they get it, because this is bound to be really good. I don't have much doubt on that fact. And then we'll do the box. We'll see what we have here. Really don't know what this could be. Oh my. Oh, goodness gracious. All right, well, we've got scissors right nearby. That is good. And we're going to need it because this one is taped and stuck over. But once we're done, remember, you young people, maybe not so young people, take no matter how eager you are, take the scissors and put them back where you found them. Don't just set them aside. Don't put them down here. Put them back where you found them. Remember, they're sharp edges. They're very deadly. So, but anyway, let's see what we have here inside this thing. Don't really know of any book that is going to be big enough to fit in a box, but let's give it a try. Oh my! Oh goodness, I didn't know. Oh, look at how big this is. Very nice. We've already seen this. We've already talked about it. This is David Narrett's book, The Cherokees in War and Peace. Look at that. Look how big that is. Very nice. Wonderful. For some reason I wasn't sure that I was going to get this, but that's not actually true. The true way to phrase it would be not for some reason I wasn't sure I was actually going to get this, but that for a very specific reason I had stopped really thinking about getting this. And what is that specific reason? That I can show you that specific reason. It's this. This is that specific reason because I have the ebook, because I have the PDF, which I've read. And it's heavily annotated, and it's as convenient as could be. This thing never leaves me. It's with me at all times. That's why I heretically had really stopped thinking about this, but I'm glad to have it. Very good, very good. Okay, let's read the dust jacket just for those of you who might have missed this the first time. For more than 150 years between their first encounters with the English in the 1670s and forced removal along the Trail of Tears, the Cherokees negotiated mounting pressures. As their world was convulsed by the spread of European diseases, competition for guns, furs, and deerskins, and imperial power's unrelenting pursuit of savage allies, Cherokee communities responded by creating new solidarities. At the dawn of the 18th century, the idea of unity among the widely dispersed Cherokee would scarcely have occurred to their leaders. A century later, chiefs would declare unequivocally that they stood for the whole of the Cherokee nation. Steps toward national unity were partially a response to the exigencies of war. But while armed conflict was frequent, the author here shows that the bonds of Cherokee peoplehood were forged primarily through efforts to maintain peace and secure their livelihoods. The Cherokees, both men and women, were remarkably skilled diplomats who practiced peacemaking as a distinctive spiritual art in which adversaries would reconcile through a mutual and symbolic forgetting of wrongs inflicted on one another. Pragmatic and purposeful, Cherokees adeptly managed relationships with colonials and indigenous rivals, seeking to preserve their independence and living space to maximum advantage for trade. Okay, and since we've got a book, we can read about the author. Oh, my. Okay. I know you can't really tell, but you're gonna trust that face. you're gonna trust that guy to handle the sources and to tell a good story, I bet. So who is he? He is the author of Adventurism and Empire and Inheritance and Family Life in Colonial New York. He's a professor of history at the University of Texas at Arlington. Wonderful. Shall we see how this starts? Boy, I'm glad to have this. Of course, it doesn't have a pub sheet, but I think this is April. I think this is an April release. He dedicates it to the memory of Michael Kamen, friend, mentor, and extraordinary historian. Okay, let's see how this starts. Like many other Native American peoples, the Cherokees were masters of metaphor when it came to negotiation with European colonial authorities. Examples abound across generations, expressed in periods of crisis and less momentous occasions. For illustrative purposes, consider a speech made by Chief Kanagachko, Standing Turkey, in September 1761 when Cherokees moved towards peace with the British, South Carolina, and Virginia after a brutal war of 2 years. Kanagachko forwarded his talk to Colonel Adam Stephen of the Virginia militia, then quartered east of Cherokee territory and seemingly poised to invade unless English treaties demands were met. The chief's remarks were put on paper by interpreter John Bench, a corporal who had lived among the Cherokees for several years. So the written text approximates, rather than captures precisely, what was spoken. He respectfully addressed his English former Cherokee allies before a breakdown in relations of war and ensuing destruction. He hoped for, quote, a peace that is never to be broke, for all our men are tired of fighting with their elder brother, the English. Okay. Well, this is W.W. Norton, and they are great, so I'm very happy to have this. All right, so we've got the Cherokees, a monumental new history of the Cherokee people. We've got Summers at Squid, Tickle, Robert Finch's last book, and we've got The Scientist and the Serial Killer, about the hunt for mainly the identity of one set of remains that were found near a swimsuit, a 1970s swimsuit. So they have been traditionally for decades called Swimsuit Boy. Because Dean Corll, when he was done torturing and tormenting and raping and killing his victims, buried most of them in his boat shed. He had a boathouse, a storage unit that he had a dirt floor. He would bring them out there and bury them. He got complaints. There were plenty of complaints to management and to him about the smell coming from his boat shed, but nobody did anything about it. Nobody thought to do anything about it. He also buried bodies on the beach at High Island, at Sam Rayburn Lake, in the woods. And again, probably a lot more bodies than we know about. His attorneys seem to think that there were a lot more bodies. The boys, the two accomplices of his, seem to think there were a lot more bodies than his official body count. His official body count, I think, stands at 30. And I wouldn't be surprised at all, since he was a killer from long before his accomplices met him. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's twice that many. But I strongly recommend the book. And if you're interested in serial killer stuff, I think you would pretty much have to be interested. I think the one drawback of the book is that it assumes a degree of knowledge about the Candyman's killings, but that's easily acquired. There are videos that you can watch, I'm sure, on YouTube. But anyway, so serial killers, Newfoundland, and the Cherokees. So there you go. That is some mail for today, plus the New York Review of Books. No need to call it a mail haul. No need to call it a book haul. Just mail, that's all, just between friends. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll see you all soon. Thank you, BookTube.